for the right lane. It's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center. Some sun this morning. Clouds on the increase for the afternoon, high 58. Currently 39. Next news coming up at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560 The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas, great coffee, period.
Let freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity on AM 560 The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Illinois leading the way again nationally, as we do in so many ways. Highest combined state and local tax burden, largest net exodus, largest unfunded pension liabilities, worst run state in the nation. We're at the tip of the spear in so many important ways, including this, thanks to Evanston Skokie again, which we've routinely profiled for their consistent and committed effort to indoctrinate young children into being cultural Marxists. And that continued earlier this month, October 7th to the 11th, we mentioned. That was LGBT Curriculum Week.
Right.
And even in Evanston Skokie, where you have largely cultural Marxists, totally on board. This is all good stuff that's happening. There were some parents who, shockingly, not comfortable with their preschoolers being taught about, California Congressman Katie Hill's private life, effectively, polyamorous families, and all sorts of other iterations of the LGBTQ plus anti-nuclear family agenda, political agenda. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Joy Pullman, executive editor of the Federalist, who has written on the topic. Joy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for asking me.
So, so you saw what we're doing here in Evanston, Skokie, in suburban Chicago. Hopefully, of course, we get that to scale. I know that's what the left is interested in doing. We have these continued issues, and the people that, sort of the center cut of the community can't believe it's happening, thinks it's ridiculous, barely can believe it, and does nothing about it. And so it continues.
I mean, and that's not only true in Illinois, but it's true in a lot of other, states across the nation. I think there are a lot of Americans who either are unaware or just, out of maybe a misguided sense of goodwill, towards others, don't really want to be aware of where the left is going in this country, even though it's on really obvious and open display, for example, on the current field of Democratic presidential candidates.
Well, what exactly were they teaching the preschoolers in District 65?
So I did an open records request to learn more about that, since I'd heard about it, and so I wanted to get a look at what actually the teachers were showing the kids. And in fact, the school district has shut down the access to its curriculum, but it was available online, and I got a look at it. I took screenshots, I quoted it, and I reported on it for the Federalist. And so I focused on the preschoolers because I think, it's just more clear for people when you look at kids that young and what they're being exposed to with this kind of instruction. And some of the things included some picture books that probably a lot of people, if they follow this, have heard of, such as the book Heather Has Two Mommies. There's a book by the teenage transgender celebrity Jazz Jennings called I Am Jazz, about his journey from living as who he is to trying to appear as a girl, as well as a number of videos of reading books like this. There were books about transgender pronouns, and there were videos about kids, saying, "Oh, I have two moms and I have two dads. I have this and I have that." And then there was basically a script given to teachers in which they were instructed to do things like show kids, pictures of, lesbian families, and ask them, is this, a real family that loves each other, kind of thing. And if the kids say, "Oh, well, that's, where's the daddy," or whatever, the teachers were explicitly told to correct the kids and to literally catechize them in this leftist way of thinking, about human relationships.
Well, I mean,
So
isn't this just so much neo-Puritanism? All that the teachers and the school districts are trying to do is educate young people about sex. This is just sex education. It's biological and cultural, and it's teaching respect for those people who are different from you. That's all it is.
I'm sure all of us and everybody listening completely agrees with, loving or showing respect and politeness to people regardless, of whatever our differences might be. I believe that God made all people in his image and they are worthy of respect and being valued regardless of anything else, that might come between us. So I don't really think that's the issue here. That can absolutely, and it absolutely is taught, to families. I mean, my faith teaches me that. I teach my kids that. But I mean, that's no, people who, have questions about this sort of content, they're not saying we are wanting to be rude and mean. They're saying we shouldn't lie to children. We shouldn't propagandize children. And I mean, that's a completely different thing altogether. You can absolutely be respectful to someone while disagreeing with them. You can be absolutely, affirming, that they are precious human beings, while saying, the things that you think aren't good for society, they aren't good for kids. That's absolutely possible to do. And I think it's actually rather bigoted to think otherwise, that and to assume all the time, that people who want to protect children and teach them the truth about the world, and, that somehow, that just to say that an exhibition of unkindness is really unfair to our position.
It seems like yeah, part of the problem, the controversy here is that these busybody parents who want to be involved when in loco parentis means you're allowed to be loco with their kids. You got to push the parents out. So we saw across the pond in England, a 10-year-old was suspended from school for refusing to participate in an LGBTQ curriculum. And we see in some of these instances where, on this side of the pond, where kids are not allowed to opt out, parents are not informed because all of that is problematic. And I would think if you're sharing such a loving thing that you wouldn't be concerned about people who would understand what's being taught and choose to opt in or opt out of that instruction.
Right. I mean, we're seeing a lot of dismissiveness, from the side of people who are pushing this sorts of thing, of the real and legitimate concerns and disagreement that, parents and people of faith and taxpayers have with what they're doing. They just act like, if you don't agree with me, there is no possible way that I can talk to you, or that you don't have any legitimate ideas whatsoever, and so nobody's going to listen to you. And that is quite frankly completely the opposite of the way that our society is supposed to work. We're supposed to be, self-governing, self-representing, and able to decide for the rules that govern our lives and not shut out of local or any kind of governance in this country. That's what the American system is all about. We get to pick who is in charge of us. Who's in charge of us don't get to pick and mold and change us and shape our ideas to their liking. And so I think that really crystallizes a lot of what goes on. I mean, so I've been an education reporter for almost a decade now. And so I think that really crystallizes a lot of what the politics sets around education, because so much of it is an absolute tug of war between two different worldviews. And one of them is that the state has the right to control the populace and the children and be in charge of that. And the other one is that the families have the right to control the children and decide how they're brought up. And so America has historically been a country where individuals, families, and local communities get to be self-determining and make their own decisions for their own selves and their families and their localities. But we are transforming into something more like Europe, where the state, the mass state, gets to make decisions for us regardless of what we think and want for
Right.
ourselves, and make us pay for it.
But I know you might not agree with it, but some kids do have two moms, some kids do have two dads, and I remember that was a
Right.
problem when my kids were in kindergarten. They're like, "Why does such and such have two daddies? One she calls dad, one she calls father." So they had to explain. They didn't go in full detail and shove this propaganda, and all these books down their throats, but they had to explain, what that is. So what age do you think is appropriate to learn about sexual education?
Well, I mean, it depends. For me as a parent, and again, I think this really is a problem of schools taking over parent and religious communities' jobs. I don't think, as a parent, I would want a teacher to redirect that question to me. How about, you would just do something neutral, perhaps. Tanya calls this lady her mom, and Tanya calls this lady her mom. And if that's confusing, go ahead and talk to your mom about that. But I totally agree that there are social situations, that are created by that for kids. And I'm not sure that it's really fair to the kids to be, put in a position of having their moms have to explain gay and lesbian sex to them when they're 5 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a fair
So
point.
that's definitely a tension going on there.
Yeah, and you framed it perfectly. And that's really what it boils down to. And this is the choice everybody has to make. Are you in control, you in charge of your kids, or is the state? That's the tension here on all of these issues. And by the way, and not just in a K through 12 setting too, but in other settings like divorce proceedings, the case that we saw this week, this terrible case in Texas where a father lost the effort to prevent his 7-year-old son from getting chemically castrated with the approval of his mom because his 7-year-old son identifies as a girl now.
Well, exactly. And in fact, I actually just wrote about that case for the Federalist this morning. And so I've been reading through some of the, expert testimony, the parent testimony in that case. And the experts that the mother called for this child agreed that he doesn't actually think that he's a girl. They said he is gender fluid, so we're possibly, the mother is heading towards possibly chemically or even physically castrating a child that even the experts that she's calling on a witness stand say, he's not necessarily a girl. And so, it's a really confusing case going on there too, but that gets right to the heart of all of these sorts of things. We have a little boy, and this is the same thing in the classroom. We have little children caught in the middle of all these adult agendas, these politics, these things that are going on, and their interest and their safety and their innocence is being sacrificed, just so that, some people can have this giant political tug of war. I think it's completely unfair to the kids.
She is Joy Pullman, executive editor of the Federalist, Federalist.com. Check out her latest piece, which I'll tweet out. 6 crazy school district responses to parents mad about LGBT indoctrination of preschoolers. Joy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hey everyone, Ken here. For 2 years now, you've heard Carrie and I use metaphors to test to see if you think your home or your business could use a revenue shot